All right, good evening, everyone. It's a Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. That means only one thing. We are talking ACC football nonstop for the next 30 minutes minimum with the best bloggers in the conference. This is ACC Breakdown with myself, Mark Rogers, and also Justin Cates and Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC. Hey, guys, how are you?
How's it going, Mark?
It's going pretty well. So we didn't think we had much to talk about tonight. It's a Wednesday night, so that shouldn't be a big surprise. But then we started to scratch the surface and dig a little bit deep, and we came up with some very relevant topics for 2016. So, guys, let's start with the ACC breaking new ground across college football, approving a centralized replay system. So how this is going to work, a la the NFL and Major League Baseball, is that there's going to be a replay official in Greensboro at the league office. And on a busy ACC Saturday where all the teams are engaged in league games, there will be certainly a number of replay officials involved and one assigned to each game. Also replay official, the head of officials, Ted Jackson, he is going to be involved and he is going to be part of the process as well. Then you, of course, have the official who made the call on the field. The head official will be in contact with the league office. So you've got three people in play on each replay. And Justin, we'll start with you. Your thoughts about replay in general and how this system you think will work and whether you're in favor at this point.
I am in favor of it. I think it's proven to work pretty well in some of the professional leagues that have put it into practice so far. And as you talked about on a busy league day or evening, you're going to have everybody spread across the conference. This way you can centralize it and focus on having the top guys really making the calls and deciding things in a centralized location. There's certainly going to be kinks, and I'm sure the first couple of weeks of conference play you'll see some issues, but I think they'll have it under control before we get to the crucial part of the season, and I'm looking forward to it. Certainly the ACC has had replay controversies in the past, not too long ago, and if this can do something to alleviate that, all for it.
So again, this involves all conference games, also involves Notre Dame in its games against the ACC. Mike, we've seen it in the NFL in particular. That's obviously the comparison there and what we're used to seeing over the last several years on the professional level. Your thoughts about how it may work in the ACC?
Well, I mean, the officiating, there were times last year it couldn't get much worse. The Miami-Duke game, obviously, is the first thing that comes to mind with all those laterals on that final play in regulation and then the knee being down and so on and so forth. I think the one obvious thing to come out of this is the fact that you're going to have a ton of eyes on these replays. So any controversial calls, I mean, the more eyes on it, the better. You can come to a quicker consensus, and I think having a centralized replay system definitely will enhance the quality of the officiating in the ACC game, which I think is extremely important moving forward because they had their fair share of controversies like Justin just alluded to last year. I think that, you know, if the rest of college football sees this model that the ACC is putting forward as something that's working, I think that it's something you could definitely adopt across the rest of the college game. I think this is what you kind of have to move towards, in my opinion, because right now the way that the NCAA officiating is set up with the different conferences kind of ruling the officiating within their given in-conference schedule. You got Big Ten officials, you got ACC officials, you got Pac-12 officials. If we can get a centralized replay system for each conference and have multiple eyes on these replays for these calls that become oh so crucial during these big-time games during college football season, I think it's definitely something that's going to be a positive thing for college football. So hopefully that this is something that will work out for the ACC and maybe, just maybe, you know, be adopted across the rest of college football.
Yeah, there's basically two results that need to come into play that fans and media and critics need to see be successful, and that's number one, that you get the call right, of course, and then number two, that there aren't these huge long delays, especially when the call seems to be fairly obvious, and that's been an issue in other sports, and hopefully the process is worked out, and they test it out in a simulated fashion a number of times before they actually take it live. in 2016. But the NCAA Rules Council has left that open for the conferences to decide, and the ACC is the first to say, hey, we're all in, we're going after it, and we're going to do it here in 2016. So that's something to look forward to. Staying on the television front, guys, the ACC television network, will it ever come to be? Where does it currently stand? So this seemed to be gaining quite a bit of traction in the last few years. John Swafford, the ACC commissioner, definitely wants to see this happen, as do the league's athletic directors and coaches, you would think, because it means nothing but money and to stay on the same level as the other conferences, especially the SEC and the Big Ten. Those television networks have been hugely successful. The Big 12 does not have a television network. The Pac-12 has had its struggles in developing any kind of a fan base in terms of television. So, Mike, we'll start with you in regards to the ACC and a television network, and if you think this is going to be a good thing for the conference as well.
Well, it would definitely be a good thing for the conference if they finally decide to move in that direction. Justin will be able to allude to the blackout situation much better than I will, living in the Washington, D.C. area. But there are times where you will want to see an ACC game. We see this happen a ton in basketball season, where there's a conference game that you'd like to watch that should be in your market, but for whatever reason it's blacked out. You can't find it on local television. It's kind of inexcusable, especially if you're living near a major university or in a major market, for you to not be able to see your team's game. And that's kind of something that has really been a huge issue for the ACC now for quite some time. You see during college football season, they'll have like, oh, the ACC digital network, and that'll be on, a local station that nobody watches ever on Saturdays. You see a kind of a pop up, oh, Raycom Sports, some random Virginia Tech North Carolina game in the middle of October. The one problem with this whole thing is that you see these major conferences getting these TV deals, and for whatever reason, the ACC just really can't move forward towards that independence from ESPN. I know they have that partial deal with the network in which they broadcast a lot of the football and basketball games across the ACC. Ultimately, this is a huge money thing, and it would be a big-time money maker for the ACC if they were able to move in the direction, ultimately, of having their own independent network with, like the Big Ten potentially, with maybe 2 or 3 different Big Ten network stations in which you could watch whatever game you needed to watch that given night. It's definitely something the ACC needs to move towards, and I think it's kind of getting to the point where this is an outdated discussion. It's something they're having every year, but no traction seems to really be taking place. So it's definitely something the ACC is going to have to continue to work towards, but right now you just kind of have to hold out hope that eventually an ACC network will come to be.
So, Mike, before we move it to Justin, I'm kind of curious about a particular situation when you talk about the markets and the blackouts and so forth, because I work at a place that we just mentioned, ESPN, where I'm familiar with blackouts and market protections involving professional markets. So let's say you've got an NBA game with Chicago and Cleveland playing the early game and then the late game San Antonio, Los Angeles, and they overlap. So you want to tip off the second game, but the first game is still going on, so a decision needs to be made. How good is that first game? It's a 25-point blowout. Okay, we'll just protect it to where Cleveland and Chicago viewers can continue to see that first game, but we're going to take the rest of the nation to the second game, and those kind of decisions need to be made. But I can imagine as soon as you started to talk about that with the overlap of, we're not talking about Cleveland, Chicago, San Antonio, Los Angeles. We're talking about, 6 schools in North Carolina? The decisions that would have to be made based on where people are living are microscopic in regards to counties and townships, to where the division is between Duke, North Carolina, North Carolina State, Wake, etc. So, give me an example of maybe a game that you wanted to see and you were in a particular region and couldn't see it.
Well, this is something I believe Justin could talk about a little bit better, but Virginia Tech played Syracuse in a game. What do you think, Justin, October?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, so I think it was October, November. Virginia Tech played Syracuse in the first part of the ACC conference schedule, and we were kind of messaging back and forth about the game, and Justin says, well, I'd love to talk more about it, but I haven't been able to see any of it. Well, Justin's from upstate New York, should be able to see some of the Syracuse-Virginia Tech games since he's technically in a Syracuse market. For whatever reason, it's blacked out in his area, and he's unable to see it. This is kind of something that's kind of taken hold across the ACC, where all of a sudden you're saying, oh, well, Virginia Tech is playing, and more, for example, I'm in the DC market. If Virginia Tech's playing, I should be able to see every game, but for whatever reason, some of the conference games, for one reason or another, may be blacked out. I'm not able to watch on ESPN3.com. It's not on local television anywhere. That should never happen, especially if you're in the same state as the given school. Like you just alluded to, Mark, with there being 5 or 6 different ACC schools in North Carolina alone, you can see how this would be an issue if you're living in one part of North Carolina, but say you're a UNC Tar Heels fan, but you're down the road in a different market. You should be able to still see UNC play if you're in the state of North Carolina. This is kind of something that's been an issue for quite some time, and the ACC is going to try to continue to work to resolve.
So Justin, so in the example that Mike throws out there, you're in upstate New York. You want to see the Syracuse Virginia Tech game. What in the world are they showing in place of that?
Well, so they use a number of local affiliates, and oftentimes the point that you made earlier, by the way, was a very good one. When you have overlapping games, that's a tough call, and I understand completely that sometimes you have to make the tough call, and it upsets some people. But in certain cases, take for example MSG Plus, which is the Madison Square Garden network, and then some, I guess. They will often dump out for pre-programmed things such as recorded hockey documentaries and things of that nature, which I don't know why they have to cut it off at the exact time and set it on, but they have a few times. Virginia Tech Notre Dame game was another one. They cut off in the final 2 minutes of a very close game that ended up going down to the buzzer. And I would love to know more about why it happens that way sometimes, but I do not have the answer at this point.
Oh boy, I can speculate because I've been involved in that for about 14 or 15 years myself, but don't necessarily know what those contracts stipulate. But I think it would come down to a contract situation. But any knucklehead who knows anything about sports knows that about 90% of the games, depending on the sport, run over. So if there's a noon college basketball game, let's say Syracuse and Boston College are playing, and then at 2 o'clock it's followed up by the Virginia Tech North Carolina game, about 8 or 9 out of 10 times that first game is going to exceed the tip-off of the second game. In college basketball, it's not too bad of a runoff, but it's typically going to overlap, so you're going to have those issues. And then if they're having the same stipulation going into taped programming, then that's really a bad thing, because most of the time you're going to cut off a game before its conclusion.
Yeah, like I said, I try to give them leeway. The networks, like you said, have contractual obligations, and there's a lot that goes into that, and there's a lot of money on the line. But yeah, sometimes you just wish there was a little more common sense with some of these decisions from time to time. But it's one of those things that a network theoretically would be able to alleviate.
We had Brittany on last week to talk about this situation. My thoughts we took the discussion in another direction in regards to what do you put on the channel and how successful is it going to be. What's interesting to me about this situation is that football by far is the most popular sport. College basketball is by far the second most popular sport in most areas of the country, and then there's a drop-off after that. Football, though, you're playing the least amount of games. So basically you're talking about a window of 6 to 8 to 10 hours on Saturdays for 12 to 15 weeks. The majority of the year is covered by other sports, non-revenue sports, a lot of softball, a lot of baseball, a lot of volleyball and other sports. Plus, you have to have re-airs of those games, and there has to be a popularity there to gain the re-air audience. And also you've got to, and I think this is one thing that the SEC has done well, and ESPN, is build documentary type style programming that's of a high quality enough to gain an audience, because that's what you're showing most of the time. So while the people sign up because they want to see football number 1, basketball number 2, or in the ACC, it could be a decent fight for number 1, but definitely those 2 sports, and then baseball probably to a little lesser extent. Most of the programming is taped programming, so that has to be engaging enough and popular enough to kind of carry the network in terms of a programming situation as well. All right, guys. Yeah, television network for the ACC. It's definitely got to be done if this league wants to stay with the Big Ten and the SEC in particular, top to bottom. Because right now, if you look at numbers of eyeballs on the TV screen, in the seats, and the money generated by the revenue sports, the Big Ten and the SEC have a huge advantage over the other conferences. This is something that the Big 12 is trying to figure out as well, with the Longhorn Network dominating its platform and kind of tearing away Texas from the rest of the conference. And the Pac-12 I just think the league's so large geographically, it's been difficult for the Pac-12 to make headway and make a difference. All right, these throwback uniforms have become quite the rage in the last 10 or 15 years on all levels of sports. And the University of Pittsburgh has made a decision in 2016, guys, to go retro, but permanently, to make this, again, their uniform design, their logo, the script logo that many people will relate to the likes of Tony Dorsett and Dan Marino in the late 70s, the early 80s, kind of in the heyday of Pitt football, when Pitt won a national championship and was really good. So you guys have seen the logo going way back, and it's been updated to a certain extent, but still maintaining the same style. Mike, do you like it?
Yeah, definitely like it. I think I like it more just because of Pitt's colors. They went with that new, like that darker blue, kind of gold color scheme. They changed the colors up a couple of years back, and I think the colors, coupled with the fact that Pitt is going with the script logo, which I've always been a fan of anyway, I really like it. They displayed some of their new uniforms today. Nate Peterman, Quadri Allison as well. There were two of the football players that were donning the new home and away uniforms. The away uniforms with the white, with the gold numbering and the Pitt script across the helmet, they look pretty sweet. So I'm a big fan of it. They're going to remodel the floor and, of course, in the basketball arena, and put the Pitt script across where it's just the block lettering Pitt right now. So that's another big move that they're going to make. But, yeah, I'm definitely a fan of the move. I really like it.
What do you got for us, Justin?
Yeah, I'm with Mike. I love it too. I don't know if it's just because we're young guys and we barely remember it from the first time it was a logo, but I can tell you what, I'm 100% with Mike, and especially with the color scheme. That mustardy yellow that they had in the 90s before they made the switch was pretty atrocious, but that block Pitt that you were alluding to, it was just reeked of late 90s design. It was just real bad. I think this is a refreshing change, and I think it's a good choice for branding to make it go across all sports and not just the football helmets.
Yeah, it seems as though they've kind of split the difference, done a nice job of updating it, making it look good for today's fan, but at the same time, it definitely draws us back to that era, again, between 1973 and 96 was the look with the script logo. So us old guys remember that, Justin. So you've got a couple notes for us, Justin, from Syracuse and from Virginia that are way off the radar, but you're going to bring them in focus for us.
Absolutely. As you alluded to earlier, we were sort of scratching for random stories in this kind of odd period between sports, and Syracuse has been interesting, actually. Dino Babers, new head coach, has been making the rounds across upstate with a bus tour called the No Huddle Tour, which is a pretty decent name. He's been going across the big cities, hitting places like Rochester, and of course hitting down the city, but Buffalo, all the big metropolitan areas outside of New York City, and trying to find people that want to know about Syracuse football and just getting awareness out there, and doing some interviews and recruiting as well. And this was another odd note. According to 24/7 Sports, Dino and his staff have offered 258 recruits this cycle, which is a lot. Talk about flooding the market. I don't know how much value a Syracuse football scholarship offer had before, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And oddly enough, only 19 of those offers were from players within New York State. Certainly not the most talent-rich state, but there are usually players and what I call foundational players, 3-star recruits who maybe aren't the most heralded guys, but the kind of guys you can build a program with if you sprinkle in maybe a 4-star here or there. The kind of guys that Syracuse in particular really need to get on board. So it's an interesting process to watch unfold as a big rebuilding job begins for him. He did have another good line that I thought was funny. He was talking about the value of stars and recruiting services, which is always a hotly debated topic among people. But he referred to Jimmy Garoppolo, who was a former player of his, of course, the backup to Tom Brady with the Patriots, and Matt Johnson, another quarterback who was actually just released by the Bengals, which is probably a good thing for him. He said that between the two of them, they had 1 star. And, of course, making a joke about the fact that sometimes it does pan out to get an unheralded recruit under the radar. So certainly something interesting there. And then my favorite story of the day, and possibly in quite some time, unrelated to Syracuse, but new Virginia head coach Bronco Mendenhall and his family of 5 are currently living in a camper while their new house near Charlottesville is being renovated. Now, this is smart by Bronco. It's a bathroom issue. That was the only room in the house they left untouched just in case the RV didn't work out in that fashion. So smart planning from an unorthodox man who I'm really looking forward to further antics from.
They were at least thinking ahead, so
Yeah.
good planning on their part. I pulled up Dino Baber's Twitter page, so I got a shot here of the caravan. Very nice with Coach Boeheim on the left and Babers on the right there. And I also found a few other interesting things. Definitely, he is on a rampage to get Syracuse out there. He knows the uphill battle that he has to climb in making Syracuse football. I don't even want to say relevant. I want to say it somewhat competitive, or not the laughingstock of the conference, along with Wake Forest generally and Boston College in this past season. Yes, it's the No Huddle Tour. And I saw an article with Babers where he was talking about how competitive this team can be. He's certainly going to want it to be exciting. He's going to spread the field. He's going to get those kind of playmakers in space and think that they can go with an up-tempo game plan. That's easier said than done when you don't have the talent. But at least if you've got a guy or two, you can try to find the mismatches and make things interesting. And he said, hey, bottom line is we're not bunting this year. We're going to swing for the fences. So we're going to let it all hang out, and we're going to play fast, and we're going to play mean, and if we make mistakes, that's okay. We'd rather make mistakes playing fast, playing spirited football, than try to conservative, bleed the clock, try to outplay the other team from a clock management standpoint. He said we got to let it cut loose, and it's going to take a few years for me to get my guys in here, so it might be ugly for a while, but we're playing fast and loose.
Yeah, and certainly with that kind of an offense, like you said, not the easiest thing to do. You need depth. If you're going to run your guys that fast all the time for a whole season, you need depth. You need players. That's why he's offering so many guys.
All right, this is ACC Breakdown. We come your way every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Eastern Time with the best bloggers in the ACC. So you can join us each and every week on Google Hangouts. If you want to catch us live, you can find us there. The replays on YouTube at my channel, Mark Rogers TV, and also with Mike McDaniel and Justin Cates there at Inside the ACC, where we post a ton of ACC content across the sports and across the board. And in future weeks, guys, I think we're going to dive into player rankings at each position, top 5 categories there, biggest ACC games in conference coming up. We'll look at the best non-conference games and also some Heisman candidates, possibly besides the obvious choice. One last note tonight is that Florida State linebacker Tyrell Lyons has transferred from the university, announced today. He was basically in a situation where he was battling just for a backup position, not a huge issue there for Florida State. They currently have 8 scholarship linebackers. Certainly they switch off from a 3-4 to a 4-2-5 defenses are the 2 main defenses the Seminoles play, so this should not be a huge issue. Tyrell Lyons, a fairly highly recruited athlete, not working out at Tallahassee and missed all of 2015 to an ACL injury. All right, guys, anything else we need to hit on before we say goodbye?
I think that's pretty good.
All right. So, again, ACC Breakdown every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. We're going to be back with a ton of stuff to talk about in the next several weeks. Best games, non-conference, ACC, top player positional rankings, top 5. And so we're pretty excited about that. All right. For Justin Cates, for Mike McDaniel, guys, we appreciate the work tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks.